I really enjoy making videos that entertain people, and if someone happens to learn something along the way, that's even better. However, in today's video, I want to talk about a really uncomfortable subject, and it actually has nothing at all to do with drums. However, it might provide some answers to those asking why I stopped performing for a few years. My hope is that this video will inspire someone, or at the very least, provide some level of comfort knowing that loss is something we all go through. I didn't make this video so I could tell you how great my mom was. That's not what this video is about. This video is about overcoming the odds. It's about proving the impossible to be possible. It's about believing in something no one else believes in, but you know it to be true. I hope you give this video a chance, and I hope in some small way it can help someone. So today I want to talk about a really difficult subject, and it's a subject that I've tried to avoid for quite some time. But a few years ago, my mom passed away, and if the truth be known, I almost didn't make it. I don't see an upside to getting into the details of my struggle, but I'm sure you can use your imagination. My mom was that person you called when you just needed someone to listen. Whether you were going through a divorce or just nervous about a job interview, my mom was that person people called for comfort. We didn't have a lot of money when I was younger. She'd save every penny to try and buy me something I needed for Christmas. Maybe a snare drum stand or just a box of drumsticks. But it never came easy. She had to work really hard for it. I remember one day she picked me up from grade school. I was in maybe first or second grade. Our car didn't have air conditioning, and it was almost 100 degrees out, so she stopped at a convenience store to buy me something to drink. When we got back in the car, I asked her why she didn't buy herself something to drink. She just smiled and said she wasn't thirsty. Then she waited until she thought I wasn't looking and wiped the sweat from her forehead. She never complained about how much she had to sacrifice for me or how hard she had to work, but I knew. We lived in the country, and it was a beautiful place to grow up, but there was absolutely nobody around. I didn't have any brothers or sisters, so it was just me and my mom and dad. I had an aunt and uncle that lived across the road, but that was it. No other neighbors or anyone to play with, so I'd just play drums all day. My dad was a good man, but he worked all day, so it was basically just me and my mom. People often say the greatest thing you can give a child is love, and I agree with that. However, I believe there's another component that's equally important. In my opinion, the greatest thing you can ever give a child is the feeling of being wanted. I could make 100 videos about my mom, but I'll just say this. I've always heard people say, nobody's perfect. I'm not sure I agree with that. When my mom was 71, she had a stroke. It was caused from lung cancer. And as soon as she was stable, they sent her to a rehabilitation center. A few weeks later, she had a second stroke. And a few weeks after that, she had a third. The doctors basically told me I had to accept things as they were. She couldn't perform any day-to-day functions. She couldn't even feed herself, and she could barely speak. She also suffered from the worst case of left-side neglect the doctors had ever seen. For those that don't know, left-side neglect is when the brain doesn't recognize anything on the left side of your body. So basically, you don't even realize you actually have a left arm. So anything on the left side simply doesn't exist. The short version, I was going to have to place her in a nursing home until she passed away. I didn't accept that. The rehab center was an hour away, but I'd drive to see her every day, and I'd stay as late as possible until they kicked me out of the place. I still remember the first day I had to feed her in the hospital. It felt very unnatural. My mom was a gladiator, but here she was confined to a bed and couldn't even feed herself. I remember trying to not spill tomato soup on her and wiping her mouth after every attempt, but I found myself constantly looking at the door. Then I realized No one's coming. It's just me. My dad passed away over 20 years ago, and as I mentioned, I didn't have any brothers or sisters, so it was all up to me. All of it. I refused to accept that I couldn't give my mom a good quality of life. Placing her in a nursing home to die alone wasn't an option. However, the doctors, therapists, and nearly everyone in my life told me I had no choice. Again, she couldn't even feed herself. But I was obsessed with finding a way to help her. Every day I'd make that drive to the rehab center. Then I'd lift her into a wheelchair and take her outside because she enjoyed the sun. Then I'd hold her left hand, the one she didn't realize she had, and I'd ask her to squeeze my hand as hard as she could. She'd put everything she had into it. Then she'd look up at me and she'd ask, "Did it move?" And I'd always look back at her and say, "Yeah, it moved. And it's a lot stronger than it was yesterday." But the reality was that hand never moved. Not one bit. We did this every day for almost 3 months. Everyone thought I was just wasting my time. Then one day, that hand moved. So I went to find the doctors. I informed the doctors and the caseworkers that regardless of what they said or what anyone said, my mom would not be going into a nursing home. She'd be coming home with me. I spent months getting my house ready. I got a loan and had a special bathroom built just for her needs. I made sure the grab bars, light switches, and so on were all placed on the right-hand side, as I knew she'd never be able to find them because of her left side neglect. I even went to CVS and bought an eye patch. Then I'd place the eye patch over my left eye and walk around the entire house using the same walker she used. I wanted to experience every detail from her perspective. Her chair needed to be placed on the right-hand side so she could see it before she sat down. I did this for days until I basically redesigned my entire house. I also told everyone I was going to find a caregiver to move into the house to help. However, I really didn't have the budget to make that happen. Friends and family pretended to be optimistic, but I don't think any of them really believed it was actually going to happen. It's not because they didn't believe in me, but my mom was in bad shape, so everyone just thought I was delusional because I wasn't able to accept the truth. Here I am putting light switches on the right-hand side of the bathroom, and she can't even get out of bed by herself. I know they meant well, but they'd say things like, "Why don't you wait and see if she gets home first? Then you can do all that stuff." But that's not the way it works. To use the word "if" implies that I might not be able to make it happen. This place needs to be ready when she gets home, not if. I can't explain it, but somehow I just knew things would fall perfectly into place. And they did. I managed to find a wonderful caregiver named Pam. She had worked in nursing homes, so she had years of experience. She met my mom, and she just fell in love with her. Pam and I worked nonstop. You just can't imagine the effort that went into it. But together we managed to get my mom to a point where she could get up out of her chair, walk to the back of the hall, use the restroom, then walk back to the living room and sit back down in her own chair, completely by herself. At one point, she walked out onto my back porch, went down 5 steps, walked over to my patio, sat down in a swing, got back out of the swing, walked back up the steps, then walked back into my house, sat down at the kitchen table, then opened a bottle of water using her left hand. Don't forget, the doctors told me she'd likely never even be able to feed herself again, let alone walk. My mom had a few really good years at home, but at some point the cancer became more aggressive, and as strong as she was, she just couldn't fight anymore. So for those that have asked me repeatedly, that's why I left the band. I did so to take care of my mom. On the day my mom passed away, I was alone with her. Pam wanted to know if it'd be okay if she ran into town to spend the night with her son. I told her I'd be fine and not to worry about anything. I remember standing at the window and watching her drive away. Once she was out of sight, I lowered my head and I started to cry. Now that it was just me and my mom, just the two of us, I somehow knew it would only be a matter of hours. So I spent the entire day holding her hand. I tried my best to reassure her that she didn't need to worry about me and that I'd be all right. By this point, she wasn't able to speak or acknowledge anything, and her breathing was extremely labored, so it was very clear when she passed away. She passed away at about 2 o'clock in the morning on October the 15th. I continued to hold her hand for about an hour. Then I got a hot washcloth, washed her face, then proceeded to make the necessary phone calls. I had literally spent my entire life in fear of this moment. In fact, when I was younger, I would even have nightmares about my mom passing away. I often imagined I'd go crazy, punching holes in the walls and screaming, much like what you see in the movies. But it was nothing like that. I know this might sound really strange, but the experience was beautiful. By that I mean my mom passed in my living room with just the two of us, with me talking to her and holding her hand, exactly the way she would have wanted it. We managed to overcome the odds. I brought my mom home with me and managed to give her some small level of independence, which meant the world to her. The doctors, as well as most of the people in my life, battled with me every step along the way, saying I was delusional and that I needed to be realistic. Realistic? According to who exactly? Now please understand, I'm certainly not trying to imply that every story ends like mine. However, the doctors battled with me daily, telling me she'd never get any better than she was at that moment. Miracles happen. Maybe not always, maybe not often, but they happen. When my mom got sick, one of my dearest friends called me on the phone and said, "Steve, you have to trust yourself." So please allow me to leave you with this. Regardless of what your situation might be, the only person that really knows is you. So you have to learn to trust yourself to make the correct decision, whatever that decision may be. And as my mom always said, it'll be all right.